on the call, but thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christina Carell. I'm PAVE's Educational Programs Director, and I'm so happy to be hosting this webinar for Washington County. I'm joined by Connie Romakers, who is the founder and program director of Tiger Turns the Tide. And she's going to talk a little bit about her experience and what's going on with Tiger and youth vaping in your county. And then I'm also joined by Dorian Furman, who is one of PAVE's co-founders, and will take you through our core parent presentation. If you have a question that comes up during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit questions to us and I'll review those. And otherwise, we should plan for this to take about an hour. And Connie, do you want to get started?
Good. Are you ready for me?
Yeah,
Super. Well, this is such a privilege, and I'm so glad to be here and thankful for this opportunity to take a few minutes to speak to those that are in attendance about kind of just exactly what's happening here in Tigard. As she said, I'm the director of Tiger Turns the Tide. We are a community coalition, and we've been around since the early 80s. My office is here at Tigard High School, and our mission over the past 40 years is basically to help promote a safe and healthy community by reducing alcohol, tobacco, and other drug-related problems among our youth. We also address the mental health issues that are facing our teens, especially since COVID has hit. We are strongly in support of limiting the access of tobacco, flavored products, synthetic nicotine, and inhalant delivery systems to individuals that are 21 years and under. This topic is so important, and we must address it if we really want to help our kids be the best they can be and to reach their full potential. We all know that kids are becoming hooked. I interviewed 3 of our security officers here at Tigard High, and they are the ones with boots on the ground. They see and know what's going on, and I just want to share a few of their statements with you. They're saying most kids skipping class are because they need to vape. There is a need to vape in order to get through the day. We have seen students resort to nicotine gum as a way to meet these cravings. They believe that the number of students vaping has increased dramatically since the pandemic. Kids are looking for a better way to feel better. 4 out of 5 students that they talked to said they started as a way to lessen their feelings of either stress, anxiety, or depression. In the short term, we all know that nicotine may help them feel good by stimulating the feel-good chemical in the brain, dopamine, but it doesn't last long. Within a few hours, the effect of nicotine wears off, and they can often that's what leads to the desire for them to vape again. And we see kids that, our teachers see kids that can't even go through a class period without needing to go to the bathroom to take a hit. We have a strong group here at Tigard High called STUD, and it stands for Stop Tigard Underage Drinking and Drug Use. And something they're working on is to get vaping sensors installed in our bathrooms. And this is what our administrators and our security believe, that if we had vaping sensors in our bathrooms, we could intercept students and give them the help that they need to kick the habit. One of our administrators said, I think we need to do everything we can to keep these products out of our students' hands. This includes keeping our Washington County ordinance in place. Something else I did is I surveyed over 100 students, and we collected a lot of their statements. We collected some stories, and I don't know if I have time, but if you would like me to, I would love to maybe share with you some of their comments that they made.
sure.
Okay, so we had asked 3 different questions. We asked them, what are your thoughts on teen vaping and flavored tobacco in general? What is your perception about what's happening here at Tigard High? And what are your thoughts about flavored tobacco? Does it really attract teens? And this is some of their responses. Vaping is highly addictive and a serious problem. I definitely feel like vaping numbers are on the rise. It happens way too much at our school. The bathrooms are a hot spot for it, and I'm oftentimes left wondering, why do people like it? It causes many who use it side effects such as anxiety, withdrawals, decreased appetites, and increased blood pressure. My friend thought it would help him feel calmer and less stress. In time, it only became worse and caused more anxiety. He can't even make it through class without going to the bathroom and taking a hit. It is becoming more normalized throughout the internet and in person. I think that flavors may play a big reason as to why most students at our school may choose to vape. Many teens find the flavors more enticing, and flavored tobacco is an advertising strategy that ropes young minds into a trap. I think that flavors get people to try vaping at first, and then after they are just hooked on both the flavor and nicotine, which is really unfortunate. And then also, like I say, I collected several stories. These were some of the these were the comments that were repeated over and over. But one of the stories a couple of them that I wanted to share with you, this is from Henry. Teen vaping at Tigard High has been a major problem. Bathrooms have needed to be closed simply because of the residue and horrific smell that is left behind. I've had peers vaping in the stall next to me, and I've had someone blow their smoke directly into my face. Students are missing out on classes and chances to learn and grow because they are gripped by their vaping addiction. Tina, she's a junior here. Vaping here at Tigard High and across the United States is a huge problem. The tobacco industry is directly targeting high school students. It is extremely dangerous and toxic. The fact that unknown chemicals are legal to put into your body is extremely irresponsible. Flavored tobacco is just another way the tobacco industry is trying to attract teens and younger youth. It is extremely careless and unethical to sell it. So these are just a couple of the stories. I have several more that I could share, but basically our students that are really working to change our environment here at Tigard High really realize that vaping is an epidemic. It is an issue. Several of them have told me that they're not just vaping tobacco, but it's also cannabis and other ingredients that are getting kids high. I mean, the tobacco company, as we know, have become very savvy when it comes to the things that they're producing and creating to really get people hooked. And I was telling Cynthia and Christina this, that in the fall, I was out and they were changing. There were a group of kids that were going from one class to another. And this kid had on a hoodie and it had the drawstring. And inside the drawstring was a little cartridge where all he had to do was reach down, take a puff. And of course I saw the vape smoke, so I knew what he was doing. With that, I thought maybe I could share with you what one of our health teachers have said. She says, we have kids charging their e-cigarettes on their Chromebooks in class. Vaping has become so persuasive. The Drug Prevention Club at Tigard High School made it its focus to have an awareness campaign, which we've been working on. I have a son in the school and he talks about how often he sees it in class. Jolly said, I do know it is at any given time, you could walk into a bathroom and see it. One 16-year-old high school student, sophomore in Tigard, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, says he uses a vape pen every day. You're exposed to it a lot when you come into high school, he said. It's hard to find people who haven't done it. He knows he's getting nicotine and learned about e-cigarettes in school. People think cigarettes are nasty, but Juuls are a healthy alternative, so it makes it okay, the teen said, referring to Juul, a company that manufactures popular and discreet line of e-cigarettes. So It's happening. It's happening everywhere. Just this past week, I've been talking to some middle school administrators and teachers. They're extremely concerned. And a couple of kids, in fact, one of them just told me today, I told him what I was doing this afternoon. He's a TA here. He says, yeah, it's really happening. That's where it starts. It starts in middle school.
Yep.
So we're seeing it everywhere. And so anyway, I hope that is helpful. And just know that if you have any questions for me as we go through the presentation, Dorian, I'm willing to answer any questions that anyone might have for me individually. So
Yeah,
thank you.
no, thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, everything you said is what we've been hearing, around the country, and it's nothing new. And, we're so glad that you're taking action. We've heard from parents around the country, and many of them have said that their kids have been able to get help because their school stepped in and their school took action. And we've also heard from principals who said they've caught kids, vaping, and the kid broke down and started crying. This one and said, thank goodness, I didn't know what else to do. I'm so glad that now, and I can get the help I need. So it's something that we're hearing a lot. I'm going to go into the presentation. You touched on a lot of what we're going to go through today. We can answer a ton of questions at the end. I can't see the questions really coming in as I'm giving the presentation, but if anyone wants to jump in and interrupt me of our panel, either Christina or you, Connie, I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions while we're going. And questions might come up, but again, much of what you said is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about who we are. We are Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, and we're an organization that began in 2018, and we're going to get into that story. We're going to talk about the national epidemic. What is big tobacco, and how are vaping companies, how is big tobacco buying into the vaping companies? Why do teens vape? What are the health harms? And then most importantly, what can you do in Washington County, Oregon? I mean, you guys have taken a step in the right direction, much more than many other counties around the country. And now big tobacco is getting in the way and trying to hold you back. So we're going to talk about what you can do. We are a national advocacy and education nonprofit powered by parent volunteers. You can read it on the screen. We fight the youth vaping epidemic and the predatory practices of big tobacco. But what I think is the most interesting is how our story began. We now support ending the sale of all flavored e-cigarettes and all flavored tobacco products, all flavored menthol cigarettes. But we were just three moms. We had no idea that this whole, prevention world existed. We were starting, our boys were starting ninth grade together. We became friends. Meredith, as you see on screen, our third co-founder, Dina Alessi, and then, our fourth founding partner, Mimi Boblik, came in shortly thereafter, also had a child our son's age. And so the three of us, our boys were in an anti-drug and alcohol talk at school. And the way this works is that the schools hire a third party to put these talks on, and then the teachers step out of the room so that the kids can speak freely. And it turned out that it was a Juul representative who was giving this talk. The anti-addiction group had Googled, vaping and how to talk to kids, and Juul had a named employee at the time, youth prevention and education, and they called on that employee and they sent someone to talk to the kids. So they were really trying to take, they were trying to be proactive and take a good step and talk about vaping. But this presenter got into the room with the kids and was talking about drugs and alcohol. And when he got to cigarettes and tobacco, he started to say, we don't want you kids smoking, and we don't want you to use our product, Juul. But he ended the sentence by saying, but Juul is 99% safer than cigarettes. And he said, Juul is totally safe and about to get FDA approval. And I'm paraphrasing, I'm not doing it in the right order. But it was shocking. And our two boys went up after the presentation to talk to the presenter. My son was Juuling at the time, and I did not realize that. It was brand new. This was 2018. I mean, who knew what Juul was? I had actually started to find Juuls in my son's possession, but I didn't really know what it was. And Meredith's son, Caleb, said to the presenter, well, I have a friend who's addicted to nicotine. What should I do? Speaking about my son who was standing there. And the Juul presenter took out his Juul, took it apart, showed the kids how it worked. He called it the iPhone of e-cigarettes, the iPhone of vapes. And he said, your friend should use Juul. So Meredith's son went home and told her about this conversation. And she called me, we called our third co-founder, and we were furious. We called the school didn't know. And one thing led to another. We started researching, we began to understand what was happening. We began to understand that this was the big tobacco playbook that Juul was reinventing with seemingly, I don't want to say safe, they say safer, no one knows, flavored tobacco products, flavored nicotine delivery systems that are so intense, that contain such high levels of nicotine, that the youth vaping epidemic was just beginning when this happened. So we founded our organization, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, and we started getting laws passed around the country, helping get laws passed. We connected with parents. The moment we launched our website in 2018, we were flooded with letters from parents who were saying, I don't understand what this is. My kid is juuling. My kid is addicted to nicotine. My kid was kicked out of school. It was just beginning, and no one really knew what it was. This was before the Surgeon General and the FDA would declare youth vaping an epidemic. This was 6 months prior to that. And we connected on a grassroots level with parents around the country. We started knocking on doors. We reached out to legislators locally in New York City, in White Plains, kind of around our neighborhood. We talked to parents, and they in turn reached out to legislators in their districts. And then we went to Washington and we started talking to our Congress members and to our senators. And some of them knew what we were talking about, but not everyone did. If you see in the middle, at the time, then President Trump convened a vaping roundtable with the industry. And that was the first time that prevention people had ever sat at the same table as big tobacco, as these tobacco companies. And Meredith there in the Pepto-Bismol pink dress, was part of that conversation. And not much has happened since then, unfortunately. The FDA is now working on the pre-market tobacco authorization process, and we'll get into that later. But you know what? They've really dragged their feet. So youth vaping in 2021, we know we're coming out of a pandemic. The COVID period between 2020, 2021 was devastating in so many ways. Teens were quarantined at home. They are sheltering in place. Many of them weren't in school. So we don't really know what the real figures are. The National Youth Tobacco Survey usually goes into schools, and they have kids fill out questionnaires in schools about tobacco use. And it's anonymous, and usually they're in the field from the first 3 months of the year, and then the figures come out kind of towards the fall. And we usually get a pretty good idea of what's going on when the questions are asked correctly, which they're not always. In the beginning, they would say, do you vape? And the kids would say, nah, I don't vape. If you had asked, do you Juul? They would have said, yes, of course we Juul. So it's all about how you ask the questions. And that we've come to discover is not always very accurate. But in 2021, the figures came out that 2.2 million teens are vaping. But these are figures that were collected at home. A lot of the kids were sitting at home, and they were answering the questions. Were their parents standing over their shoulder? Were they, no one really knows. So the FDA said that the 2021 data is not a trend, and you can't really compare it to previous years. So we're really not sure what's happening. But what we do know, the empirical data that we're getting from families and from schools around the country, is that as kids are returning to in-person learning, they are returning to vaping. And this is going to become a huge problem. I mean, you're seeing it in your schools. We work with one of our partners is a man who founded a company that creates vape detectors that he puts in schools, and works with the schools to provide education. you know, their sales are up over 2019. I mean, it's a real problem. So you touched upon the fact that kids are feeling anxious and depressed, and they feel that if they vape, it'll make them feel better. Well, after COVID, after being stuck at home for 6 months, for 9 months, these kids have such severe emotional issues, and many of them turn to vaping because they think it'll make them feel better. But in fact, it really exacerbates those feelings. So these are just some figures, and the Oregon statistics really reflect national statistics. And if we look closely, we can see in the late 90s, you know, 20 to 30% of high school kids were actually smoking cigarettes, you know, normal combustible cigarettes. And through the hard work of health organizations, schools, parents, the government, that figure had gone down to about 5% in 2017. And again, the Oregon statistics reflect that. What we also see, the dotted line there, are e-cigarettes. And e-cigarettes came on the market about 2011, 2012. And you can see that there was a surge in popularity. Kids started, and then there was a slight drop off to 2017. Well, in 2017, Juul launched. And Juul created this vaping epidemic. They came out with their flashy design. As you said, the kids can charge their Juul in their computer in class, and teachers are none the wiser. Granted, more teachers know now than they did in 2017, but you can see that there was a sharp increase again in 2017, and that's the Juul effect. Washington County, how do kids get their tobacco products? And this is among kids who actually use tobacco. How do they get their tobacco products? You can see the majority of them get them through social sources, and the majority of them get them through friends under 21 years of age. I mean, right there, that says it all. You know, you can say, well, we'll put the 20, you know, tobacco 21, you have to be 21 to buy it. It doesn't matter. People are always going around. So you have to really just end the sale of all flavored products, which are targeted to kids, if you don't want kids to be getting these. Again, as I said, these are the national numbers, and the Oregon numbers reflect the national numbers. In 1991, the smoking rate was 27.5%, and it went down to just under 6%. And the e-cigarette really are the opposite. It mirrors that. E-cigarettes are now about 28% of youth are using e-cigarettes. And no wonder, they're targeting kids. If you look at this, the youth marketing, Juul, when Juul launched, they had all of these great lifestyle launch parties, Times Square, you know, all of these fun events. They used young, hip models. They used colors. They used, you know, they used all of these graphic designs, and others as well. Blue, who actually just got denied their marketing order by FDA, but we'll get there. Also with concerts and car races. And then the marketing to kids, the emails, social media, you know, they say, again, this is Puff Bar when they're talking about being stuck at home during COVID. They say, stay sane with Puff Bar this solo break. If you need to escape parental texts, they're targeting kids, and there's no way around that. It's obvious. And then marketing at point of sale, you know, grocery stores do the same thing with candy and cereal. They put everything at eye level, the colors, all of the great things, they put at eye level so that when kids are in the store, they see it. You know, one of the final frontiers for tobacco industry looking to market its products to impressionable and price sensitive youth. It's all about coupons. It's all about point of sale, you know, all of these great colors, all of these great posters, but it's also about posters outdoors. And if you notice, the majority of tobacco retailers are in the proximity of schools. They're also in low-income neighborhoods, and they price it such that in low-income neighborhoods, you can buy the same product for less, because as we'll get to later, they are targeting priority population. So point of sale is very important as well. They target priority populations, the tobacco industry, for decades. I mean, we know about the tobacco industry targeting African Americans in general with their menthol cigarettes, but what not everyone knows is that they target LGBTQ populations, military veterans. I mentioned the low-income neighborhoods. You can buy a pack of cigarettes, you know, $2 less in a low-income neighborhood than an affluent neighborhood. They target rural populations, racial minorities, Native Americans. You know, all of this has been proven, and big tobacco has not changed their stripes from, you know, 50 years ago, and they continue to use the same playbook. I think the most egregious of this targeting of communities is how the tobacco industry targeted the African American community, the tobacco industry rather. And if you look at, you know, menthol cigarettes, when they first came out, African Americans were not drawn to menthol cigarettes. This was a concerted marketing effort. They decided to start marketing to this population. They started these great lifestyle ads. You know, this was the 60s and the 70s. This was the first time that a lot of these communities had actually been portrayed in ads where they saw themselves in ads. There's actually a fascinating documentary called Black Lives, Black Lungs. It's 15 minutes, so it takes no time, and I think everyone should watch it. It's by a young African-American filmmaker, and he talks about this, how the tobacco companies decided that they were going to target African Americans in order to get them to use menthol cigarettes. And if you look now, 80% of African American smokers, or more than 80% actually, smoke menthol cigarettes. So it was actually a success story, a tragic and perverted success story, but in a marketing way. It's 2022 and we're still waiting for regulatory action. When then President Trump at one point, I believe it was 2020, said, we're going to ban all flavored pod-based systems except tobacco and menthol. But they left all of the disposable brands on the market and all of the refillable devices on the market with 5,000 different flavors that could be used to refill. So you had 5,500 flavors on the market before his supposed restriction and 5,500 flavors on the market after the restriction. Puff Bar has become the most popular disposable e-cigarette product among teens, and it is inexpensive. It comes in dozens of flavors, many of them iced, which is also the new trend, which we'll get into. And, you know, there are lots of other disposables, but this happens to be the most popular. So when the FDA started looking at the PMTA, which is the pre-market tobacco authorization, and started to get all of the applications, Puff Bar decided that they were going to switch to synthetic nicotine, which is derived nicotine, chemically derived nicotine, not from a tobacco leaf, because at that time, FDA did not oversee it and they could sell with no impunity. And it was, again, perverted brilliance, but they ended up becoming the most popular brand among teens. Just a month ago, Congress passed a law that gave FDA authority over synthetic nicotine. So that loophole has been closed, and we're going to see what happens in the next month or so. Hopefully they will shut them down. Again, I mentioned the vape detector sales are increasing for schools. As kids get back to school and as the anxiety level has increased in depression, you know, kids are turning to vaping because it makes them feel better, but in fact, it exacerbates it. And school districts around the country are continuing to sue Juul. You know, the schools have to divert such immense resources away from teaching, away from sports, away from just a normal school life to be able to deal with all of these kids who are vaping. You mentioned vape detectors. Schools have to buy vape detectors. They have to hire people to patrol the bathrooms. They have to hire school counselors to talk to the kids. I mean, it's endless. So these schools, over 50, I think it's probably now over 600. It just keeps rising. And at some point we're going to see it. I don't know, it's going to come to a fruition, but many state attorneys general are also suing Juul. And there have been a couple of cases where Juul settled. And I think we're going to see more of that as well. So I mentioned the devices, the teen favorites. These are what you see, what kids are using these days. There's the Puff Bar, tobacco-free nicotine, but then you also have the Miley Mini, which are so tiny they can fit in your hand. I usually have my props. I didn't bring them today, but you have a Stig also. And again, they come in these amazing flavors. You know, you can see watermelon and blueberry and mango and iced blueberry. And you know what? It was really a perfect storm. The colors, the flavors. So in 2020, among high schoolers who vaped, there was a 1,000% rise in the use of disposable e-cigarettes. Now, Juul is not disposable because you can refill it. You can buy a pod and refill it, but these are disposable and these are cheap. They come in flavors and they're the new teen favorite. And then you mentioned nicotine gum. You know, the approved nicotine gum for cessation is something that we recommend and pediatricians recommend to help kids stop vaping. But the tobacco companies are coming up with so many other fun products that kids can use to keep that buzz going, to keep them, you know, until they can hit their Juul at the end of the school day. You know, they have these nicotine pouches, which are like the pouches that kids used to, like the tobacco chew of the past, but now it's fruity and minty and there's no gross like liquid that you spit out, you swallow it. You have toothpicks, which kids can chew on. Each toothpick has the equivalent nicotine of 1 cigarette. And then you have gum, and it's not the nicotine replacement therapy gum that helps you. It's great gum in great flavors that kids love to chew, and it gives them a buzz. And then there's this new thing called a non-nicotine vape. They like to position them as wellness vapes. You know, they put vitamins in them. They call them, you know, energy or relax. And there's no nicotine, so they're not regulated by the government. But again, it's a gateway. It normalizes the behavior for someone who says, well, I want to fit in. So instead of vaping a Juul, I'll vape an energy vape. Well, it normalizes the behavior, and all of this normalizes the behavior. And then, you know, someone mentioned, I guess it was one of the kids said, you know, how can they let these products on the market? Look at what's in these products. And these are just a compilation of different chemicals that you find in a lot of the different e-cigarettes on the market. They're FDA's known harmful and potentially harmful substances. So see that these are the toxic substances. And, you know, you see lead, nickel. You know, who knows if you're allergic to nickel and you start vaping a product that has nickel in it, you can get a severe lung illness. You know, acetone, cadmium, nicotine. I mean, it's just, you never know what your body can handle. And to have like all of this stuff heated at high temperatures, inhaled into the soft linings of your lungs, it's catastrophic. And we've seen that. So you did mention earlier, Connie, the dopamine reward system, the pathway, and that's what nicotine really addresses. Kids are highly susceptible to addiction. You know, in childhood and adolescence, the brain is forming. Doctors say it's plastic because it's in the process of becoming what it's going to be as an adult, and it's imprinting memories and it's learning. And so this sensitive dopamine reward pathway is becoming rewired for further addiction. The nicotine causes permanent cognitive changes. So you get that hit of pleasure from the nicotine and it wears off, and you need to keep replacing it. And then you get used to it, and then you need more and more and more to get the same feeling. So it totally ruins your feelings of happiness and your emotions, but it also affects your cognitive abilities. It worsens your memory, your processing speed slows down, your impulse control. A lot of people, parents tell us that their kids, you know, have extreme flare of anger and you know, that's the impulse control. And then the mood disorder. It can cause, if you're not anxious or depressed before, when you are in need of that nicotine to fulfill that addiction, you will become anxious and depressed. And then if you already are, it exacerbates it. We mentioned the heavy metals and all of those chemicals. You have no idea what that's doing to your lungs. We have a mom in Florida who is in the hospital now. Her son is undergoing a lung transplant and a kidney transplant. And he was an athlete and had a horrific lung illness. He was in the hospital for about 5 months. They went to his college dorm to clean out his room, and they found just piles of mango jewel pods, mango jewel. Another family is going through much of the same thing. We have families whose kids have seizures. These are the worst of the worst. Doesn't mean everyone's going to have this, but it just goes to show that these products go really, really, really deep into the lungs, and they cause irritation and inflammation, especially the menthol. What the mentholated opens up the lungs, the mentholated product, and a lot of these flavored products are iced. The menthol will open up the lung passages. It'll allow the poison to go deeper. It makes the nicotine more toxic, and it makes the nicotine more impactful. So you don't need as much nicotine if you have a menthol cigarette or a menthol vape or a menthol, pouch. It will make it more addictive. Kids who have asthma are having horrible asthma attacks, and it can exacerbate asthma. And then chronic lung disease. No one knows why the whole EVALI lung illnesses from about 1.5 years ago. Many researchers say it was a mix of different illnesses, but they just lumped it all under that because different people have different reactions to different chemicals. So, and then the heart, the heart is so important, and nicotine is a stimulant. They actually say, many researchers we've spoken to say that e-cigarettes actually might affect the heart more than regular cigarettes, because nicotine is such a stimulant and it restricts the blood flow, and it's the vasoconstriction. So when you're using nicotine and at such high levels, it increases the blood pressure, it increases the heart rate. And, a lot of kids will say they feel like their heart's, beating out of their chest, because the stimulant is just so strong. So, that part, the nicotine is really problematic. And then the flavor chemicals, there was a scientist who did research who said the flavors are toxic to the heart cells. They've done studies with mice, and that was a study that came out about 1.5 years ago. So on so many different levels. And then, there are additional risks as we're going through the COVID situation. It gets better, then it gets worse. We have to keep up our immune system, and our kids have to stay strong. And, to have these products weakening their lungs and weakening their immune system, it's really a problem. And then I mentioned seizures. For a while, FDA was tracking seizures because they were getting so many reports of seizures. Well, they don't have the manpower anymore to track seizures, to track EVALI. They have COVID. And so they stopped tracking those. But we still have parents who reach out to us who say their kids have seizures because, again, the level of nicotine is so high. And when you're vaping, it's not like a cigarette that you put out after a cigarette. You can vape the entire pod without stopping because there's no start and there's no stop. So these kids are ingesting huge amounts of nicotine in a very short time. And then the gastrointestinal issues are dramatic. They call it getting nic sick. And again, it's the nicotine which is affecting the gastrointestinal system, and kids are vomiting. And that's a sign of nicotine poisoning: vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps, severe weight loss. And then, kids pass these things around. So they pass it around and they're sharing germs. And a new study came out literally 1.5 months ago that said, just like cigarettes can raise your blood sugar and create prediabetes, so can e-cigarettes. So that's a problem. And then we talk about why teens vape all the time. Well, they vape because it's cool, because it's become normal in their society and they're pressured, peer pressure, to do it. And then they have such stress, anxiety, and depression, which we've talked about, and they think it'll help them, but it really doesn't. The first time many kids do it, they talk about that head rush that they get from the nicotine and how great it is and how they just want to replicate it all the time. And before they know it, you know, they're addicted because they're again, the nicotine levels are so high, and kids don't realize that the sweet flavors, you know, it's not smoky like a cigarette. So they feel that it's not as addictive as cigarettes. Juul had this ad saying, you know, quit with Juul or switch, and it's safer than, well, kids don't hear safer, they hear safe. And they don't make the distinction at that young age. So they perceive a much lower risk to these products, which, you know, that's the point. That's the marketing point. So these are 10 signs that your kid is vaping. And a lot of people love to look at this, and we have conversations about this all the time. I want to just make sure that if one or two of these points describe your child, it doesn't mean your child is vaping. You know, most kids have one or two or three. Some kids have 8 or 9, and that probably means they're vaping. But if their door is closed all the time, if they all of a sudden have a very secret attitude, if their personality changes, or if you're going out to dinner and they're in the bathroom all the time, or they can't sit in a group without getting up to go outside, you know, something might be happening. We talk about the sweet smell of e-cigarettes, and in order to camouflage that, a lot of kids will use candles or room freshener or even incense, so that if a parent comes in and says, what's that sweet smell? They'll say, oh, it's the candle. You know, my son would come home at night and he smelled so sweet. I thought he had a girlfriend. I said, Philip, do you have a girlfriend? You know, you smell so sweet. He's like, no, Ma. You know, so it definitely clings to them. And then dry mucous membranes, the propylene glycol, which is in the flavoring of all e-cigarettes, dries out your mucous membranes, which means you're drinking more, you're drinking water all the time. You can have nosebleeds or mouth sores, and often a dry, raspy cough from that. And then if you notice colorful plastic caps, USB drives, you know, a lot of these things have cords, you plug them in, small highlighters, pens. There was something I just saw recently which said, you know, where does your teen hide their vape? You know, do they hide it under their clock so it's next to their bed? They hide it under their pillow, they hide it in their shoe, you know, so they're hiding these things. Changes in sleeping patterns, the nicotine, the stimulation will keep them awake, but often the need to replenish that nicotine. So if they fall asleep and the nicotine depletes, they will wake up. Many kids will vape in the middle of the night. They sleep with the vape under their pillow, and it's a huge problem. We hear it all the time. And under their pillow next to their bed, and it's really bad. Raspy cough, I mentioned that before, from the propylene glycol, but also lung infections, shortness of breath, COVID. You know, kids who vape are more likely to catch COVID for many of the reasons we mentioned before: the lowered immune system, the passing of the vapes. Again, the nicotine creates such high, it's a stimulant. They're jittery. They might be more sensitive to caffeine because of this and stop drinking coffee. They're definitely more anxious. They're more irritable. They have mood swings. When they're vaping, they're happy. When they're not, they get anxious. And then changes in eating habits. We talked about the being NIC sick, the gastrointestinal issues. And then this is a good one, is the unknown or increased spending or deliveries. You know, for a while, you could buy these things online, and you could buy them through different vape shops, and they would deliver it to your door. And, you know, we have Uber Eats or Go Puff, and they will deliver it to your door. So if your kid is getting something and you suspect they're vaping, and they say, oh, I'm just getting something to eat, it could very easily be a vape. They do deliver. So it's really important to talk about vaping with your child, and to start early, and to come from a place of understanding and support. You know, we talk about big tobacco and how they targeted our kids. You know, kids don't understand that, and they think that vaping seems normal because it's got sweet flavors and they're on TV. And so they don't understand always that it's harmful. I think it's important that everyone does their homework, and that they really understand what you're talking about before you go talk to your kids, because kids are very well informed, especially the older ones, and they know the terminology, and they might not take you seriously if you really don't know what you're talking about. But it's important to start early. I think you mentioned, Connie, that someone said kids start in elementary school. And that is absolutely true. You know, there are figures about how many kids are vaping in elementary. So we get calls from schools and from parents who say, you know, we found a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, they took their older brother's vape, you know, whatever. The kids are starting young. But also prevention groups are starting commercials and informative campaigns young. My daughter would run into me and say, Mom, I see the truth orange commercial with the hamster on the wheel, you know, and she was 9 years old. So she was seeing those. She was seeing the anti-vaping commercials. So you got to start talking to your kid because they're seeing the good and the bad. And so you want to reinforce the good. And if it's hard for you to start talking to them, use situations where you might see vaping. If you're walking on the street, you know, and you pass a vape shop, ask the kid, you know, do you know anyone who vapes? Is anyone in your school vaping? You know, they might not want to talk to you, and that's fine. Don't force it. It's not a one-time conversation. You come back to it again and again. And, you know, we say be considerate of your child's privacy. Don't go into their room when they have 3 friends over and say, so guys, what's this I hear about vaping? Because they will just be mortified. So again, it's about finding the right time and the right place. And, you know, everyone is different and everyone has a different relationship with their child. So, you know, figure out what works best and talk with them. You know, the more you lecture them, the more they're going to pull back. So you can ask questions and say, I really don't understand, you know, what are you seeing? And ask for their advice and ask for what they think and how they feel. You know, again, it's important to show that you disapprove of vaping, but don't accuse them. You know, don't say, gee, what's that smell? You're vaping. You know, again, you're going to ostracize them. So, and then avoid scare tactics. You really don't need them. If you think your child is vaping, you know, this is a really difficult space to navigate because people don't really understand. Every person is so different. And if they're vaping and they don't want to stop, then they're really not going to stop. They have to want to stop. And you have to enlist the help of your pediatrician or your school nurse or your school counselor or prevention specialist. And there are a lot of tools that help. I talked about the nicotine gum. My son, and I know many kids who use the patch, and then they use the gum for cravings, and then they use it in you know, with counseling. And then many will use antidepressants because, again, the nicotine has kind of screwed up with the dopamine in the brain. Relapse is normal. Some kids will quit 10 times and then they keep, you know, they fall back into it. But sometimes, you know, they manage to hold off longer and longer. So again, you just got to keep at it. There's some great quitting apps here. We have the Truth Initiative and teen.smokefree.gov. But you guys in Oregon have some really great resources also. And if you're watching this, maybe take a screenshot or we'll have this on our website under Oregon. But these are great resources as well. And as I said, talk to your school counselor, your pediatrician. They also have some great ideas. So we talked about what can we do? And I mentioned you guys in Washington County took an amazing first step, you know. In November 2021, you were the first county in Oregon to eliminate the sale of flavored nicotine products, which is amazing. I mean, the fact that you guys did this and it was voted for is amazing. You know, really, you took the first step to protect kids because, as we mentioned, if you don't end the sale of flavored tobacco products, flavored nicotine products, kids are always going to find a way to find it. So you just have to end the sale of it. But Big Tobacco came back and they used their playbook and they filed and they qualified for a referendum for Washington County's May 2022 ballot. So that's around the corner. You know, this is so important that I'm just trying to think, we're at the beginning of April and I know that you have mail-in ballots. So it's actually going to happen before that. You know, all of these national organizations, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, American Heart, American Lung, American Cancer Society, are all behind ending the sale of flavored nicotine products to protect Oregon kids, to protect Washington County kids. So you have to vote no in order to protect kids. You know, it's a common tactic that the tobacco industry has used for decades. They overturn local laws so that they can keep selling to kids. And the laws that try to ban flavors are what they use to hook kids. This is the campaign. It's 34-314 campaign. It's endorsed by all of the public health organizations and also your local organizations and Oregon Nurses Association, et cetera. Over 85% of youth who use tobacco start with the flavored product. You can say that about vaping. More than 85% of kids. I mean, it says it right there. So you have to vote no to big tobacco. No. May 17th is when this referendum, if you want to jump in, Connie, and you know, as you're local and you're, you know, I hope that the kids who you spoke to, if they're over 18, that they'll hop in there and vote. And then I hope the younger kids will talk to their parents about voting. No, because, you know, as you said, flavors hook kids, and the only way to stop kids from taking on this habit is to end the sale of flavored nicotine products. 95% of smokers began before the age of 21. I mean, you know, if you shut off the on-ramp to these products for teens, if you stop the on-ramp, they're not going to start. They're not going to start. So we as parents and teachers and school administrators, we all have the power to fight back against the tobacco industry's referendum tactics. They're not only using this in Washington County, they're using this in California. They're using this in states and counties around the country. And you have to get out and vote, and you have to encourage your friends and your family. And, you know, if your kids are over 18, that would be great if they could vote as well. So this is super important. It's, you know, we have to protect an entire generation of Washington County kids. It's really, really important. So anyway, we've come to the end of our presentation. I mentioned at the very beginning, we are made up of volunteers around the country. If you want to join us, please scan this QR code, but also go onto our website. If you have any questions, please feel free to just email us at info@parentsagainstvaping.org. Go onto our website. You can click on and just ask a question, make a comment. And then we are on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, if you tweet, and Facebook. We have a great parent support group on Facebook for parents of kids who vape. And a lot of parents share stories. They ask for advice. They get support from each other. So if you do have a child who's vaping and you don't want to talk to a friend, you know, a lot of people are embarrassed or ashamed. There's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. It's not your fault. We had a mom in Connecticut, of all places, who said to us, you know, I was so ashamed and so embarrassed when I found out that my son was vaping that I didn't talk to anyone and I didn't know what to do. And if I'd known that you guys were around then, I would have had someone to talk to and maybe I could have stopped him. And now he's 21 and you know, or 22 and he's still vaping. So, you know, we're a community and parents have to help parents. We have to support each other. We have to support the schools. The schools have to support us. And, you know, sounds corny, but it really does take a village. And we really need to help each other. So,
Maureen, I just wanted to add something to that for those that are on the call to, you know, really help us get the word out, because it can be confusing. Some people think that it's already been approved, but they aren't really conscious of the repeal. So I think if we can do all that we can do, especially for those in our own circle, the parents, and I definitely plan to talk to our students that are 18 and older. But most definitely, I think if we can just get the word out, spread the word here in Washington County, the importance of this and the importance of voting no on 34-314.
yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And, you know, I did not mention it earlier. You touched on the THC issue, and vaping and all of these products are gateway. It's a gateway. It normalizes the behavior from the non-nicotine wellness vapes, which then kids move on to the nicotine vapes, and then kids move on to the THC vapes. So again, it's a gateway. It normalizes the behavior. So if we can stop them now, hopefully we can prevent kids from going down that road. Someone is asking if there's a link for the parent group on Facebook. If you go to Parents Against Vaping on Facebook, it should be somewhere there. There is, you just click on, and there are questions. We want to make sure that, you know, that it's a safe community for parents who want to ask questions and talk about their kids. So we ask questions: is your child vaping? How old are they? Do you abide by the rules? Which is basically no bullying, no shaming, no this and no that. And once you answer the rules, I actually do the Facebook, so I approve you. But again, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact link. I don't know if someone else.
Dorian, I'm adding it to the chat right now.
Oh, thank you. And then, you know, I don't know if anyone has any other questions. Oh, thank you. Christina just put it in the chat, if you guys can see the chat. That's great. And then just looking. Great. So yeah, again, we need people like you. We are all a community, and we help each other. And when we say, you know, if you want to volunteer with PAVE, oops, sorry, it's getting sunny. You don't have to give us an hour a day or 10 hours a week. It could be just to send a letter to your legislator. It could be just like some of our things on social media. It could be talk to your friends about Parents Against Vaping. You know, any little bit helps, any little bit counts. And, you know, we want to get these laws passed in Washington County. We want to get these laws passed in California, in New York, and, you know, we want to put these people out of business. So that's really what we're here to do, and protect our kids. So thank you for having us. I think we're probably almost out of time.
There's one more person who posted something in the chat. Folks who want to volunteer with the No on 34-314 campaign can go to, and there's a link there.
That's amazing. The link is www.flavorshookoregonkids.org. Okay, www.flavorshookoregonkids.org. And again, you know, it can just be forwarding all of the emails to your friends. You know, many people don't know what it is. And it's also, you have to vote no. Some people will think, well, yeah, I want to protect our kids, I'm voting yes. You have to vote no. No to big tobacco, no to flavored tobacco, no to protect our kids. So thank you all. And, you know, we're excited to see May 18th, see this law passed.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Connie, Dorian. I'll close it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Again, go to our website if you have any questions, or if you want to learn how to talk to your kids or anything.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.